In recent years, modern card design has created a ton of power creep. It feels like every set for the past few years has had some insane busted auto-include card. And in my Your Favorite Commander is Boring vid, I lamented these pre-built easy powerhouse commanders. The cards that do the thing they ask of you, like how Corvald wants you to sacrifice things, but also sacrifices things on his own. So I wanted to recommend some old school commanders that require some build around to function, but still have power. None of these are commanders that reward you with card draw. Drawing cards is great, don't get me wrong, but it's not a super interesting reward for a theme. All the commanders I'm going to recommend here were printed before the 2011 Commander product, so none of these were designed with EDH in mind. Before I get into the list though, if you like my videos, consider subscribing and checking out the Patreon, thanks. First, I want to give some honorable mentions and a disclaimer. So, disclaimer, when I rank cards for my Ranking Every Legends series, I'm not just ranking on power. A commander's uniqueness or the variety in the different styles of decks they can build factor into my rating as well. But for this video, I will be rating mostly on power, or at least leaning heavier towards the stronger commanders. I want to highlight commanders that have kept up with power creep. Okay, on to the honorable mentions. Zur, Captain Sisay, and Godo. It's not that these cards aren't good, but rather obviously still good. All three of them have some CEDH viability. As long as Necropotence and Rhystic Study are legal, Zur will be a good card. Honestly, most CEDH decks just play Necropotence, Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, and Grasp of Fate as their only enchantments, but tutoring those powerful enchantments and putting them into play is enough to make this commander CEDH viable. And as they print new 3 mana or less enchantments, Zur only gets more powerful. Captain Sisay used to be an awesome Storm deck, and then they banned a Paradox Engine. So now this is more of a Stacks Toolbox commander, where you want to find the right hate bear or right card for the right moment. And these days we get a lot more legendary permanents and legendary creatures every set. So this is another card that is already powerful, which seems to get stronger every set. Godo is not a powerful card until they printed Helm. Then Godo became famous for being a 0-card combo. You see, Godo tutors an equipment into play, but goes infinite with the equipment Helm of the Host. So as soon as you have 11 mana, you can cast Godo and equip the Helm, which gives you infinite combats and infinite attacks. And this is a 0-card combo since you only need to cast your commander, which you already have access to at the start of the game. You don't need to draw or tutor any combo card. You might be thinking, isn't 11 mana really difficult to get to? But in mono red, if you just play every piece of fast mana and every ritual, you could win on turn 1. Peep this opening hand. City of Traders, that's 2 mana. Spirit Guide, that's 1 red. Rite of Flame, 1 more red. Poetic Ritual, 1 more red. Desperate Ritual, 1 more red. Seething Song, 2 more red. And then Lion's Eye Diamond for the last 3 red. Boom, a turn 1 win. I actually lost to this hand once in a CEDH tournament. These commanders are all very powerful, but what are some other classic commanders who don't see tournament play, which are still tough enough to keep up with over a decade of power creep? Also, these 5 are in no particular order. They're all very good. Grand Arbiter is one of the original boogeymen of the format. 2 blue-white for a 2/3 human advisor. White spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Blue spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast. So because of how this card is worded, a blue and white spell will cost 2 less, which is awesome for a Sphinx's Rev or some 4-drop Azorius card. And if this commander only had the first 2 lines of text, it would be a powerful mana accelerant. But the 3rd line of text really pushes this commander to the next level. The sheer mana advantage you get from this card is insane. If your opponents want to spot remove the Arbiter, let's say they use an efficient 1 mana removal spell. Well, now it's 2 mana, so it's double the cost. And if the Arbiter player wanted to counter the removal with something like a negate, then the cost is reduced to 1. So now the Arbiter is getting mana advantage on this exchange by countering a 1 mana spell with a 2 mana spell. If you throw in any other tax effects, it can be very difficult for a player to stop an Arbiter deck from popping off. Even after all these years, I think Arbiter is still a threatening commander for almost any theme you try to use with him. Balor the Defiled is a commander that when built efficiently can either combo or create so much value your opponents won't be able to keep up. 2 black for a 2/2 zombie dwarf. Minion creatures get +1/+1. Pay black, exile Balor. Each player returns all black and red creatures from their graveyard to the battlefield. So if you've ever played against a deck using Living Death, you know how strong this effect is. Imagine this curve. On 3, you cast Buried Alive, putting a combo in the bin. Next turn, cast your commander. This is now a removal check. If they don't have removal, you can just activate your commander next turn and win. And that's a turn 5 win involving 1 card. Add fast mana or rituals or tutors, and this can be even faster and even more consistent. But you don't even need to play combo for this commander to be good. Just play self-mill cards like Deathcap Marionette or Stitcher's Supplier. Then once you have 7 mana, your commander is a Living Death in the command zone. You just play it, get the value from reanimating a bunch of things, and unlike Living Death, it only affects black and red creatures, so you're not reanimating everything for your opponent. Balor is a really powerful mono-black good stuff commander, and yet it has very few decks on EDH I think it's really underrated. Future Sight was a set full of weird, unique cards, and Dyra of the Gitu is no exception. 1 blue-red for a 2/2 human wizard. You may pay 2, exile a non-land card from your hand. Put 4 time counters on it. If it doesn't have suspend, it gains suspend. I played her as a commander for a while, and here's what a normal game looked like. On turn 3, cast the commander. On 4, you suspend 2 cards. 1 massive resource destruction card, like an Obliterate, and 1 massive threat, like a Kozilek. And then you just play removal for the next 4 turns and win, because I'll cast the Obliterate and follow up with Kozilek. When they have no permanents in play, Kozilek is pretty good at just finishing off the game. It's crazy that this commander just lets you suspend anything. Extra turn effects, planeswalkers, big artifacts. Doesn't matter. This Dyra is incredibly consistent and powerful. So much so that when I built the deck, I eventually scrapped it. Because the deck was really boring in how linear the power was, and there were those awkward moments where my opponent would float mana and counter the Kozilek, not the land destruction spell, so then we just ended up with nobody having anything. And even if you cut the land destruction, you cut the Eldrazi Titans, you cut the extra turn spells, you cut all the broken things you can do with this commander. On turn 4, suspending a Stormtide Leviathan and an Utvara Hellkite is still insanely strong. It ends up being another removal check. Does your opponent have the board wipe or spot removal for your commander the moment you cast it? If not, you probably just win. Being in blue also means you can back everything up with counterspells as well, so as you upgrade this deck with more free counterspells, it just becomes that much stronger. If you like being the arch enemy from the moment you reveal your commander, this might be the deck for you to build. Wart Raid Mother is another classic commander which is very powerful. 4 hybrid Gruul for a 3/3 Goblin Shaman. When Wart enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red and green Goblin Warrior tokens. Each red or green instant or sorcery spell you cast has Conspire, which means as you cast the spell, you may tap 2 untapped creatures you control that share a color with it. When you do, copy it and you may choose new targets for the copy. Conspire is a weird mechanic that really hasn't shown up on many cards. Super fun in the cube though. And the fact that the commander makes tokens also helps the commander pop off even harder. I've seen a lot of Wart decks where they just ramp into the commander, cast more ramp, which they copy, and then follow up with some of the biggest Gruul instants and sorceries in the game. You can double Last March of the Ents. You can hit the Motherlode twice. Also, when you copy an X spell, you get to keep the value of X, so you can make this your X spell commander if you wanted. Gruul spell copy is a very unique theme that we really just don't get to see in the colors. And after all these years, I still think Wart is the best option for Gruul Spellslinger. Lastly, Teferi. No, not that one. The creature version. 2 blue for a 3/4 human wizard with flash. Creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield have flash. Each opponent can cast spells only anytime they could cast a sorcery. This is a blue commander who destroys other blue decks. If Teferi resolves, so many blue-based decks will just crumble. And letting you cast any creature with flash is another really powerful thing to do when you're playing a blue Drago deck. You get to leave all of your mana open for counterspells and flash in your threats when needed. Here are some fun creatures you can flash into play. Arcanus the Omnipotent, since you really want to be able to untap with Arcanus and get that sweet tap to draw 3 effect. Or you can flash in a Clone to make a surprise copy of the biggest creature in play. Also, holding up all of your mana without having to compromise playing your threats means you can play some of the higher mana value counterspells that do other unique effects, like a Spell Swindle or an Aether Snatch. And because of the way Teferi is worded, saying your opponents can only cast things as if it was a sorcery means that casting Teferi on 5 and then untapping and playing a Knowledge Pool is basically a hard lock. Okay, well, it's not a perfect lock because players can still cast their commanders or channel activated abilities. So there are a few outs, but it's a fairly strong lock, considering they won't be able to cast anything other than the commander. I played against this commander quite a bit back in the day, and he's really fallen off. But if you want raw power in mono blue, I genuinely think this commander has what it takes to keep up today. So those were my top 5 powerful legends from before Wizards designed anything for EDH. What do you think? Do you still play with any of these today? Are these still strong enough to keep up with power creep? Let me know in the comments below. And let me know any other old school commanders that you also really love. There were quite a few other powerful ones that almost made the list. Thank you so very much for watching, and special thanks to my tier 3 patrons, whose names you see here. If you want to be in the credits, check out the Patreon.